And we should be live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to MySecurityTV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. My name is Chris Cubbage. I'm the Executive Editor with MySecurity Media. And today we're going to be joined by Peter Coroneos, who is the CyAN International Vice President. That's CyAN is the Cybersecurity Advisors Network. And they've released some new sort of it's a legislative project, 0 day, looking at protecting white hat researchers. So looking forward to joining with Peter, and just slightly behind time today. So sorry, we're just starting after the hour. Let us just walk through what we've been up to and what we've got coming up. Welcome to Say Good Day and let us know where you're listening from. But otherwise, we cover off on aerospace and space, defence and national security, cybersecurity and critical technology, and cities and infrastructure. We should be streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and this will also go out as a cybersecurity weekly podcast. Peter's our only guest, so we may go for the full half an hour, but otherwise we'll just catch up on this latest piece of research. And most of you will know Peter. I've got his book here. We'll talk about his book too. That came out, or it might have been a couple of years now. It's amazing how fast time flies. Just what we've got coming up. What I've got this week on Thursday, we've got Reese Clare. He's the Director Asia Pacific Channel Solutions with Motorola Solutions. This is a bit of an uptake for their webinar that we're going to be doing next week, with them on Safety Reimagined, and looking at the Motorola Solutions set of intelligence systems that you can start to integrate enterprise and infrastructure with. Quite interesting, and again, we'll deep dive on that in the webinar. Also this week, we're doing a book review with Lisa Sisson on her book Risk Starts and Ends with People, and that's going to focus on her chapter Reputation, Revenue and Risk, and obviously that's a strong cybersecurity link in there on reputation. And ransomware, this is a cast back to last Friday's episode. We had our panel session with Ian Yip, Sarah Sloan and Elliot Dellis. And we've just released an interview with Sarah Sloan as well with Palo Alto Networks and in the lead up to Australian Cyber Week, which is on next week. And there's that webinar with Motorola Solutions next week, from cost centers to productive supply chain and strategic e-commerce hubs. That's going to be joined by Victor Nigem, who's their strategic solutions specialist. He's in Chicago. I spoke to him today. And then also catching up with our City Festival, about 15 to 20 events in November for this. Please go to city.space and check out the Australian space industry infrastructure, technology and investment series of events. Thank you very much to our series sponsors. I won't name you all, but that's who we are currently working with. And also, if you're looking for solutions in particular, welcome to go to the marketplace and check out a range of these solutions that are available. We are media partners to AusCyber's Australian Cyber Week, which starts next week. We're going to be releasing the Australian Cybersecurity magazine in line with that. That's the 25th to the 29th of October. We just released our interview with Michelle Price last week, and we will be joined again by Michelle next Tuesday and also next Friday as the week rolls out. And then also in November, the 17th and 18th of November, it's gone virtual, the ASIAL Security Conference, and that's part of the Security Exhibition and Conference as well. Thank you to Secure ID, an RSA business. And if you want to support the channel, go to mysectv.shop and check out our Cyber War series. So that's it from me, and let's be joined by Peter Coroneos, the Cybersecurity Advisors Network International Vice President and 0 day legislative project leader. Peter, it's always a pleasure, mate.
How are you, Chris?
Very good, and thanks for joining us today, mate. It was relatively short notice as well, so I do appreciate your time. But yeah, talk us through, this is a global coalition that's been built to protect cyber researchers, and I suppose I've already cast your book. I'll cast that back. Where are we at now? When was that? That was 2019?
2018.
18.
So we've just clicked over 3 years. I was just thinking, as you mentioned it before, if I was writing it again today, there's probably nothing I would change in that. I mean, it's actually pretty both uncanny and also scary that nothing's changed. So
I hear you. We do the same thing with the magazines. You look at sort of previous years of our magazines, and the headlines are much the same. That call to action is much the same. But that's security for you, isn't it, really? And cyber. And last time we met in person was the 2019 30-year celebration of the internet. So it has been a little while, and I trust you've been well. Maybe just talk us through, you're the project lead on this. So the Zero Day Legislative Project, we'll talk about who some of, not so much the ambassadors, but it's been supported by the likes of, say, Chris Painter, Casey Ellis, Stephanie Dugan. Maybe the background to this project. You're always busy and project driven. So, yeah, how's this one come along?
Well, honestly, I was pretty surprised that this came up for us again. This issue had sort of disappeared. I know it was a thing a few years ago, and we'd done some recent stuff during the pandemic where we'd found, we as Cybersecurity Advisors Network had been advised by a couple of our members about some fairly serious flaws in some of the software that the universities were using to remotely monitor student examinations. I think you know about these programs. They're called invigilation programs.
All right.
So they're basically tracking eye movements and keystrokes and other things to form a view as to whether or not cheating's occurring. And I mean, putting aside the privacy implications of that, which are not insignificant, our researchers have found some fairly serious unpatched vulnerabilities within some of the software that was being rolled out by the 38 universities. And we managed finally to get an advisory out that enabled the unis to go through and secure those systems, at least better than they would have been. But on the way through, the two main researchers that we were working with urged us that they didn't want to be identified in any way. And when I asked why, they said it's because we could get sued. And I realized that this was still a live issue. And then subsequent to that, earlier this year, we were on a call with about 150 cyber professionals, including quite a few vulnerability researchers. This was a global forum. And the same issue came up again, and it was coming up in the chat, and they were all talking about threatening legal letters that they were getting and how it was putting a chill on their research. And so I started to get really concerned that at a time, Chris, as you know, when vulnerability disclosure has been so central to trying to secure systems, and we've had so many 0 days responsible for the major attacks, Colonial Pipeline, even back to WannaCry, NotPetya, the Microsoft Exchange server hack, the Kaseya attack, and then the Colonial Pipeline. I mean, these are all 0 day attacks. So we need the research community out there feeling secure in the knowledge that they can be reporting flaws to vendors in good faith and not fear sort of legal reprisals. So I raised the issue with our board, and they agreed with me that this was an issue that we ought to pick up. So one thing when you raise issues with boards is they often then lump you with the responsibility of doing it. So, you know, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, don't even second the motion. You'll be in there assisting.
Anyway, so
but what? Well, I suppose the one question I have is what legal risk is there? Is it the criminal side, or is there liability potentially there as well? Was it more, you know, if they're researching and they create or find a potential 0 day?
Mm-hmm.
There's some questions there about the definition of that. Is it a real 0 day? But I suppose the crux of this project is to protect the researchers. It might not be a 0 day, it might just be a vulnerability.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's not necessarily an exploit. 0 day could just be one of those exploits that sits there waiting, but otherwise a vulnerability. So is that the potential risk, the real risk that they saw was the criminal side?
Well, it's not only criminal. So it depends on the jurisdiction that you're talking about. And we're actually doing this as a global project. So there'll be a jurisdiction by jurisdictional analysis of what specific laws will come to bear. But typically it'll be copyright law and or criminal law around unauthorized interference with a computer system. Those are the two main heads of liability, but it could also be under data protection or even potentially contract law, depending on the nature of the relationship with the vendor. The OECD had then issued a report at the beginning of the year, 2021. It was a guidance for policymakers on this issue. A very, very, very detailed, well-researched, and I think one of the best pieces of policy research that I've seen in a long time. And one of the things they'd concluded was that it was in fact the legal barriers to disclosure that was putting a chilling effect on the research community, which lined up very much with what they were telling us directly. So I think it was on the back that really gave us the confidence that we had, as it were, the blessing of the OECD to go forward and push this out as an advocacy / reform initiative around the laws of the world that will be applying, to the different groups of researchers wherever they may be.
So where are you at the moment? I've got the media release, and just for the audience, we didn't actually introduce CyAN. It's a Paris-based global not-for-profit association representing cybersecurity professionals in 22 countries. And Peter, I think it was around 2018, 2019 that you created the chapter here in Asia Pacific and Australia.
Right. Yeah.
So where is this at? Is this like I say, an advocacy, like open letter kind of approach, or is there research going on here?
No. So phase one is the building of the coalition.
Got it.
So that's sort of where we're at now. We've pulled together some very critical early stage supporters in this that are providing both rhetorical, but we hope material support through various avenues. So as you mentioned, Chris Painter, ex-White House, Kieran Martin, ex-NCSC in the UK, the head of the NCSC there, Katie Masouras, who founded the Microsoft Vulnerability Disclosure Program.
Yep.
Very, very well known and respected both in the US and internationally. And of course, Katie Ellis, who's the co-founder and I guess he's the chairman of BugCrowd and also Disclose.io.
Well, with Casey, how does this slightly differ from sort of the bug bounty approach? Because that's generally what the researchers are doing. They find a vulnerability, they may well approach that vendor or whoever is subject to that vulnerability and say, hey, I've just found this and I'd appreciate a bit of a payment. Is that kind of, but Casey and sort of BugCrowd and HackerOnes and the like get engaged to find that. And so obviously they're contractually protected in many ways as well. Is that kind of what they're doing? How do you define a researcher in this regard?
Yeah, we're not so concerned with the payment dimension of this.
Yeah,
that's a separate issue. What we're concerned about is whether or not the researchers are being paid. We want to create a legal environment where they're not threatened. For the
and how do you
research.
define in your mind, how do you define a researcher? Do they have to register themselves, or
the definition?
Because they might go, they might be a legitimate hacker going, oh shit, you found me. Okay, no, I was just doing research.
No. That's a very valid point. And in fact, Chris Painter's initial caution to us was that we needed to be quite circumspect, quite careful about being able to differentiate the good guys from the bad guys, as it were. So we landed on a definition that's bona fide 0-day vulnerability researchers following responsible disclosure processes. So that really covers, and in brackets we put white hat in for good measure to avoid any confusion. So it's very much oriented towards those who, if they fall out of the a hacker by definition, a criminal hacker, cannot be thought of as bona fide. It's the motivations essentially behind the actions, the thing that determines whether they fall within or without outside of the safe harbors that we'd seek to create.
Is it potentially going down a licensing route? Again, I've always argued here in Australia, at least, but a lot of jurisdictions are like that, that if you're a security consultant, you need to be licensed to do physical security, but then there's no licensing regime for cybersecurity. And again, if you're going to be doing active research to find vulnerabilities, there's an onus on you, I think, to know what you're doing, so you're not going to break anything, and two, know that if you do find that vulnerability, how you will treat it as well. You're not going to pass it off. So there's a lot there from the researcher's perspective to, one, how do you define a researcher, and two, that's where I suppose the success of the bug crowds and the hacker ones have come through, because that's the structure. They give it a structure, right?
Yeah.
And how do you see this playing out? And is there really, one, how do you see it playing out, and then two, how you manage the different jurisdictions on this as well?
Well, I mean, it's a great question and an important question. I think it underlines why our relationship with the likes of Bugcrowd and Disclose.io so early on in this project are so critical to things, because as you point out, they've already got established structures and models where they're supporting bona fide researchers. I wouldn't imagine that they're supporting criminals within, at least not knowingly, within their organization. So whether I'm not sure that we were thinking along the lines of a licensing scheme per se, but there will have to be some sort of verifiable measure of the legitimacy of the individual or groups concerned. This is where the next phase will be consultation, where we're going to be going into these kind of details to say, what are the parameters around a zero-day researcher or a vulnerability researcher, whereby they would be eligible for the kind of legal immunities or safe harbors that we're going to be seeking to build into the laws of the world.
Okay. And I imagine there's potentially, even from the likes of, say, law enforcement, that they would potentially support this as well, because then they can differentiate the white, they don't waste their time on white hats, and they can focus on the black hats, and then even have a pool of researchers there that they can engage with to assist them as required as well. I mean, there's no doubt we need as many researchers going through the code, because there's so many vulnerabilities. There's not a shortage of work, right?
That underlines the point. The need for these reforms, Chris, is at a time when the need to identify, because the internet's touching everything now, and we've got IoT, starting to proliferate as well. The potential for vulnerabilities in just about every single area of life you can think of is just proliferating as well. And so it seems to us logical and desirable and optimal that we should be protecting the people who are seeking to protect us, rather than having them continually feel that they're exposed to potentially the demise of their entire career on the basis of some very antiquated laws that were never designed with this kind of problem in mind.
And going back to the OECD, this project and that discussion paper completely separate, correct? Or
we
knew it was coming?
We weren't aware of that until we'd gone some way into the project, and we started talking to the likes of Kieran Martin and others that said, oh, by the way, the OECD's just released something on this. So then we went and spoke to the OECD and we said, listen, we really admire the work you've done here. It's just, I believe the lead of the OECD project that produced that paper told us that they had about 90 cybersecurity advisors and legal advisors that were all involved in producing that policy work. So as I say, it's an incredibly impressive piece of work. They look at the economic analysis, the vulnerability disclosure, they look at the impediments and the drivers. So it's a very, very 360-degree view of the issues. And so when we approached them and said, look, the problem with the OECD is they're essentially a policy body. They're not an implementation body.
Yeah.
And so, I think our offer to them was, we'd love to pick up this ball and run with it. And their response was, well, you have our, we would love you to do that, because there's nothing worse for a policymaker than produce some great policy and then have it wind up in somebody's bottom drawer.
Well, we've got Matthias Cormann there, who's heading up the OECD. We've got an Australian there, so it might be an opportunity to reach out to him with an Australian accent.
Definitely, we're pulling in all our friendships on this project. I think it's a nice example, Chris, of what global collaboration actually looks like.
Yep.
And, people talk about collaboration all the time. And yes, there are information sharing networks, and there are formal and informal and bilateral and multilateral processes. But here is a really tangible process where we've got a group of very, very senior individuals that are all looking through the same lens, or at least maybe through their different lenses, but we're all seeing the same thing. And that is that, this is really an opportunity to go out and do something good.
Well, look, once I saw it, it was one of those things, and I noticed Chris Painter as well. It's a good opportunity to give Australian Cyber Week a plug next week. He's actually running the hypothetical on Monday, looking at healthcare that we discussed with Michelle Price. So if you want to catch up with Chris, head to Australian Cyber Week on Monday for the hypothetical. And Peter, maybe just to catch up on CyAN, seems to be getting bedded down, and these are the types of projects it's obviously created for. How have things been, and what's kind of the outlook, other than you raising this at a board level and getting cop with it, but anything planned for 2022?
Yes, I want to foreshadow, we're quite concerned about some of the mental health issues that are emerging within the profession.
Yeah.
And so you can stay tuned for an announcement early in the new year on something that we want to do globally. I've already done some work with them just within the membership of CyAN. We call it personal development, but it's really stress management skills and helping them keep, their career and the demands of their job in perspective. It's something that's really concerning me personally, and also organizationally and professionally, that the people, it's almost a different slant on the same legal problem, but instead of it being a legal problem, there's actually a health issue. It's having equal, if not more, devastating impacts. There was some good research that came out last year from Nominet in the UK, and I won't quote the numbers now because I don't have them at my fingertips. And also another follow-up piece of work from VMware this year, both showing large surveys of CISOs and senior cybersecurity people, just talking about the degree of difficulty they were having with separating work-life, the sense of all-encompassing responsibility, lack of resources, playing through to personal health problems, problems with substance abuse, relationship problems. And it's all because you take any individual in a situation and you load them with responsibility, and you don't give them the adequate resources, both physical, mental, emotional, as it were, as well. Anyone's going to crack under those conditions.
Yep.
And I think this is there's been some discussion of it, but I think for me personally, because I've got a background in personal training as well, these in the mind field through meditation and mindfulness. So for me, it's a beautiful opportunity to bring together those two fields, and let's see if we can apply some of these mindfulness skills to help relieve some of the burden on our colleagues. So
I have seen it, and it's you're not the first one to raise it. We have had sort of other listeners approach us to say, "Are you interested in covering something like that?" So even from the industry itself reaching out to us, they've raised this as an issue. I don't think the industry is alone. I think everyone across the board, across different sectors, but obviously IT and the cybersecurity side, we're kind of on the front line. They're often the hidden ones, the more silent ones as well. And I think also how the industry talks to each other. I noticed here in Australia, there's a divide within the industry itself, even. And so there's a lot there to unpack. And I'll give a Cyber Leadership Institute. I noticed his name's not coming to me right now, but I've seen him doing sort of online meditation training as well, and was on Zoom. So I mean, that's the modern way. I think it was even on LinkedIn, but it was okay, well, that's
that might have
different.
been
And
me. I mean,
no,
I've
it
been
wasn't
doing
you,
that
but
as
it
well.
was. But look, like I said, I saw it, noted it.
Well, that's great. All right.
Yeah, and
I think
I
more of that, the better. I think, Chris, it's
yeah,
really needed right now. And I mean, the pandemic has really exacerbated these issues, particularly within our profession, because we've had all these flow-on effects of remote working and all the added insecurity that's brought in, and that all translates back into workload for our defenders. So
yep.
they're really at the
Well,
pointy end.
I think stay in touch with us on that one too. We'd like to cover that and potentially can put you in contact with some others that might be looking along, not so much even similar initiatives, but again, just that call to action. And Dan, if you're listening, down in Melbourne on LinkedIn, he's got quite a following just on Are You Okay? Just keeps checking on people.
Good.
And and it is just shows that sense of caring makes all the difference sometimes as well.
I'm thinking, if you can find a silver lining from the pandemic, it really is around these issues of looking after each other.
It is as an industry. Like I said, there's still a divide in the industry, unfortunately, with some that comes down to that competitive nature as well. There's still some in the front line there that... but anyway, it's one of those things that we do. This is why I do what we do here and just jump on. This has been one way that I've been able to handle it, Peter, is just jump online rather than doing the odd webinar or the odd event. Bugger it, I'll just come on twice a week. That's my release and allows me to keep in contact with people such as yourself. So, Peter, what we'll do, we'll definitely try and catch up in the new year, if not by the end of the year. Keep us in mind. We got the release anyway, so we'll stay in touch with CyAN, and we do have a sort of a partnership with CyAN. We've got you on the marketplace there to recognise the organisation, and naturally we'll stay in touch. So Peter Coroneos, the CyAN International Vice President and Zero-Day Legislative Project Leader. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Chris. Always great.
Great, mate. We got there in the end. And working from home kind of highlighted the whole discussion of how that came through. So I appreciate it, mate.
We're being authentic. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not in my kitchen.
No, that's right. And also Peter's book there, Cyber Breach Communication Playbook. It's available for purchase on the MySecurity Marketplace. And then we haven't had any chats come through. So if you happen to be listening, reach out and I'll send you one of those out. And I've also got a video camera. Next week, we'll be giving away a D-Link PDZ video camera for those that are listening. So first one to fire through will purchase you a copy of Peter's book. Thanks, Peter. Have a wonderful day, mate. I'll let you go and I'll do my close.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Cheers, mate. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, very good. We got there in the end. Always a pleasure. And he's very knowledgeable in the industry too, so well worth to listen. And keep an eye out at CyAN. And CyAN, I should have asked for the website. It'll be in the show notes, but otherwise it is cyan.network is the website there as well. Let me just finish off with the report of the day as we do. A Coroneos Cyber Readiness Report came out today and it'll be on the marketplace very shortly. This is a survey of 3,600 IT managers and remote workers across 18 countries. And I'll throw this one up here so you can see it. Phishing there way out in front, just under 60%. Then you got DDoS attacks, malware attacks, video conferencing attacks, which was an interesting one, and exploiting exposed services. So they're the trends. It's quite in-depth, this particular report. Most of you will know Coroneos, but again, it's available for download on the MySecurity Marketplace. And I mentioned we're going to be out next week, not with the cyber risk leaders. If you want to get into that, you've still got some time. But next week will be the release of the Australian Cybersecurity magazine in line with Australian Cyber Week. And we've got a feature in there. We're doing some weekly interviews with Cyber at the moment. But again, one to look out for. And this week, I'll be interviewing Lisa Sisson on a book review. Risk Starts and Ends with People, Reputation, Revenue and Risk will be the focus. That'll be on Thursday. And then also on Thursday, I'll be interviewing Reese Clare, who's the Director Asia Pacific for Channel Solutions with Motorola Solutions. And this is in the lead up to a webinar that we're running with them next week, Detect, Analyze, Communicate and Respond. We were initially going to focus on warehouse and manufacturing. This is going to be broadened out in terms of some application case studies across aviation, healthcare, utilities, and manufacturing and warehouse. It's quite an in-depth platform that Motorola Solutions has, so well worth tuning in and checking that one out. And otherwise, we'll be back next week as well, next Tuesday, with Michelle Price, the CEO with AusCyber, and getting a sort of take on the start of Australian Cyber Week, and we'll have her back on Friday. And also go to acity.space and check out the series there. The program is up. You can register, and we've got about 15 different events going on during the month of November. So hopefully you can join us for that. That's it from us. Nice and short today on the MySecurity Marketplace. We'll be back, as I mentioned, with those interviews on Thursday, and otherwise our live edition on Friday morning. Thanks for joining us.